This is what we need to do. This is going to bring that school to the next level.
That's Thinkering. This Thinkering process is going to be really transformational to all subjects that we're talking about.
The value of the Alliance is it's a thinking collective. Now we have a greater understanding amongst everyone. And that's not what's common in schools.
I always tell our students this can set you apart, make you stand out, something to remember you by. It's an opportunity to share. It's win-win all around.
I think the biggest part of what we do are the humans that we work with on the other side of that, right? Really see the human impact, the way that they're interacting and working with their community.
It really does have to flip. You should be able to think about that as your hero's journey, to be able to go, this is how I was able to overcome.
And they really have this drive to want change. And I feel like continuing that mission is really important.
Welcome to Thinkering Minds podcast. Today we're doing the vibrant world of cultural responsive education, tech integration, and project-based learning. Yaritza is the CEO of McKenzie's Adventures, a Microsoft and education global training partner. Why don't you take the time to introduce yourself, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. I'm Yaritza Villalba. I am the CEO and founder of McKenzie's Adventures. We are a global education consulting company working with schools and organizations across 6 continents, and I'm happy to be here.
Yaritza, you founded McKenzie's Adventures. It's a great name. Tell us the story behind it, and how does it reflect your personal mission?
Yes. So Mackenzie is actually my daughter, but the name McKenzie's Adventures came about because of my children's books. And so when I found out that I was having a baby, I had asked everyone that I knew, every possible person, especially in education, to send me children's books, but I wanted culturally responsive children's books. And what I realized was a lot of folks just sent me books that had a Black main character. And I felt like, although I didn't meet my daughter just yet, I felt like it didn't give that New York spunk, that Afro-Latina spunk. And I remember calling my friend Matthew and I was like, hey, they didn't really send me culturally responsive books. And he was like, well, if no one has it, then create it. And I just remember like sending him a manuscript for a book and he was like, you're done, right? Like, that's it. Like, we have the book here. And when it was time for me to actually create this consulting company, I threw out so many names, but none stuck to who I am, right? For me, I'm like happy. I'm always energetic. See, I speak fast. I'm Hispanic and I'm from Brooklyn. Please mix the two together. Hello. And so it was more about what is going to be a name of a company that allows folks to think beyond the big picture. And McKenzie's Adventures just stuck to that. The idea that when I'm providing a workshop or when I'm working with schools, I'm taking you on a journey, and I need you to understand that it's not just done with the 6 workshops that I've implemented. We're going to keep riding this wave until you feel like you've become an expert.
You've worked with a lot of underserved people in the education system. What did those experiences teach you about yourself and about how we need to rethink education for every learner?
Well, the first is the idea that there's a huge gap in learning, and we know that African Americans or Black and Latinos, we're on one side, and then our white counterparts are on another side. But that's just because of the system, right? So I always say when you're in education, you really think about where the resources go and what zip codes have access to a lot more than others. And so now that I am a business owner and I do work with schools, closely with schools, I think about the communities that aren't getting the same resources that I might see at a conference. I always say the conferences are the best place to look at who's getting what, because mostly teachers in underserved communities are not able to afford going to conferences and getting all the information that you and I probably have access to. And so one thing that I know for sure is we need to fight to get those communities all the resources that they need beyond just tech, right? By resources, I mean adults that really love these students and really want to see them win.
Yeah. When we talk about getting there, I guess it starts with culturally responsive education that's sustainable, not just one-off. Here's a lesson and we're moving on, but really integrated part of the practice. What does that mean for you, and why do you feel it's an important piece for the classroom?
Well, culturally responsive teaching or culturally responsive sustaining education is the idea that you're taking in all of a student's interests, their cultural experiences, their backgrounds, and you're integrating it into their learning process. And so you're more likely to remember something when it is of significance to you. Like you probably remembered how you felt when you first had your heart broken, or something that was traumatic, or something that makes you really excited. And that just means your brain reacts to that. It holds it. It's like it acts as a sip and it lets go of everything that you feel is not really relevant. And it holds on to everything that you believe is important. And that's what learning should be. If a student really enjoys music and they really enjoy listening to pop, I'm not saying that the teacher should, play pop every single day, but maybe you want to give some kind of example so that that student understands, hey, she really did pay attention to what I put on that white card at the beginning of the school year. Or she really does care about what I say and my interests, and they're more prone to actually sit there and do the work and to really make connections with the outside world if it has significance or feels like, hey, I'm being seen in this class. They're acknowledging my interests.
How do you get a teacher to go from teaching content to connecting with the student stories and identities and using that as the mechanism for education?
So that takes us right back to the components of SEL. And I always say the most important is knowing yourself. And so when we discover who we are as educators and as adults, it teaches us a lot about our learning process. Usually when you first become a teacher, you think that you're like this expert and you're going to go in and you're going to implement everything they taught you in these teacher prep programs. And you usually have that one student that usually tells you at that first day, I don't care about this, right? I know I did. And I was 21 teaching 21-year-olds. And my students were just like, ma'am, I don't care. And so for me, it was, I have to rethink everything that I learned and realize that this has nothing to do with the kids who are in front of me, who are battling drug abuse, who are battling homelessness, who are reading below third grade reading level, who are 21-year-olds. And I have to now recreate what that looks like. But it also made me refine who I thought I was as a teacher. And so with educators, I usually say the best way that you can really build relationships with students is first understanding who you are and then taking yourself out of the equation. How we learn is not the same way that our students are going to learn.
Who did you think you were? And then who did it help you realize who you needed to become?
When I first became a teacher, I thought that I was the best thing smoking. I thought I was ready. I had all of my folders. They were color-coded. I had the classroom set up. But the reality hit when I was asked to teach an overage program. And I walked into the classroom, and at that time, I was teaching history and Spanish. And I walked into the classroom, and one of my friends were there. And he was 21. And I had just got back from college, so this was the first class I was teaching. And I spent all summer partying with him. And he never told me that he didn't graduate high school. And so the reality was, wow, I just partied with you all summer. Now you're my student. And the first thing that came out of his mouth was, I'm not calling you Miss V. You are Yaritza. And I was like, no, I'm Miss V. And I got to give you this grade. But first we got to find out how you're going to graduate, because I don't feel comfortable teaching my friend where, in my mind, it's like, I'm doing this. I'm Superwoman. But the reality was, he said something to me that I believe was important and it stuck with me. And it's, just because you did it doesn't mean that I'm going to do it. And I had to really think about the fact that at one point I had left my friend behind. I thought that he went away to college just like all of us did. And we just, didn't keep in contact. But every single time that I would come back to visit home, he was there. So I was like, okay, we're on Thanksgiving vacation together. We're spring break together. But the reality was he never graduated. And I took those words and I just made it like my biggest goal to help him graduate that year. Of course, because I wanted to selfishly party with him again next summer, but also because I knew that he was struggling. And it was a lot being a 21-year-old with kids that were 16 years old in the classroom.
Yeah, that's a wild experience for sure.
Yeah.
We talk about the SEL side and how important that is. What about real world connections and project-based learning? When we talk about dreaming big, what's the ultimate project for students? What would that be?
So I created a global cultural exchange. And when we're talking about that real world aspect, there's so many challenges that our students are dealing with around the world, not just here in America. So when we're thinking about poverty, when we're thinking about no clean water, when we're thinking about war, we're thinking about equity and equality and women's rights. And so with that global cultural exchange, not only did I want students to introduce other students to their culture and their foods and, what does the outside look like if you were to take me on a tour, which some students took us on tours. They were on their skateboards riding their skateboards and filming. And I was just like, just don't show us your address. But the idea of tying it into the global sustainable development goals and having students create these call to actions where they're just like, this needs to change and we can't wait for 2030 to come for it to change. Someone needs to do something now about the fact that we don't have school buildings. We don't have institutions to learn. And it's 40 of us literally filming each other on a flip phone. That was the reality. Yeah.
I guess kind of my next question, not every teacher has tons of resources at their disposal. What's their advice for designing that engaging real world content and projects, but on that shoestring budget?
Yeah, I would say give students options. When I was in the classroom, choice boards were my favorite things because one, it showed me what kind of students that I had in front of me. And two, it helped them to understand that, yes, although I taught this lesson, how you may have taken it all in is totally different, right? And so you may want to do a poetry. You may want to do a poetry slam. You may want to rap. You may want to write an essay, which very few students wanted to write essays. But also, you probably just want to draw a collage or some kind of cartoon script. And so giving students choice also allows you to kind of like take away the fact that you probably don't have access to the internet or Wi-Fi. I've worked with some educators, especially in Uganda and Nigeria, where the teachers are so devoted to having their students explore that they're using their own cell phone, and students can only record when they're near their office space for the Wi-Fi, right? It's about one educator, 40 students, and they're just taking turns recording. It's one chair, and then you just see the student get up, and the next one sits down, but learning is taking place, and they're so excited about the possibility of someone else seeing that video in the outside world.
Absolutely. And as far as engagement goes, do you feel like that was something that was different than other projects where it just really had them engaged right from the start?
Yeah, I think when you're differentiating instruction or you're giving students multiple entry points of learning, you help to discover that excitement because you're now saying you can create this video or, right, there's that or, you could do a podcast. And some students don't like showing their faces in videos. And so the excitement is, I can just speak. And I'm like, yeah, and you could even add music to it if we use soundtracks for education, right? So having students really explore how they want to show you their learning. I remember having a student here in America when I was teaching, we did a Regents prep class. And I said, okay, everyone gets 5 extra points if you could get your parent to help you out on this TikTok video. And it was so much fun because you had parents doing TikTok dances while the students are in front of them throwing out U.S. history vocabulary terms. Like the funniest thing ever. But do I remember that video from 8 years ago? Of course I do, because it was exciting and they didn't have to use TikTok. I had a parent literally playing the piano while his daughter's sitting on the piano and she's like singing historical errors like on the piano. You would have thought that it was like a whole show, but this is Regents Prep.
Yeah, that's such an important thing to engage. I had so many experiences in high school where I was the antagonistic student and I didn't want to do the project the way it was assigned. I was excited to do a project, just not within the bounds that I was limited to. So I did Romeo and Juliet, but me and my friends did the entire thing as a rap battle between the families. And, that was really cool and set me up for a lot of social success. So the antagonistic student who just wants to do something a little bit extra, what's the best version of that you've ever seen?
That was all my students. Remember, my students were 21, which means they did high school 8 years as opposed to 4. And so when you walk into a class, especially a history class, that you've probably failed 6 or 7 times, the first thing that comes out your mouth is, I'm not doing this. And that was literally all of my students. And so restructuring what might have worked last year is not going to work this year because these students are like, yeah, I'm not doing it. Thinking what my class looked like, I spent an entire summer decorating, having custodians paint my class and turn the entire classroom into a timeline, a historical timeline, so that it could be so, I guess, in comparison to the Smithsonian African American Museum, and literally put footprints that I got from Amazon on the floor so that the kids remembered in chronological order. It starts here and it ends over there with President Obama at that time. And my students would just walk into the classroom in awe, right? So first creating that space where you feel a little bit more comfortable, but then creating a dynamic where we're going to learn different. And what I meant by that was we acted out a lot of things. So in the 1920s, instead of my students just learning about the Harlem Renaissance and the Roaring '20s, they acted it out. They became Henry Ford. We built cars out of Legos. They became car salesmen. They had to tell me about the assembly line. When we talked about the Harlem Renaissance, they had to create a character, historical character, come to me like in costumes. I would have what's called Miss V's bar, a speakeasy, and literally I would serve root beer. But in order for them to get a glass of root beer after eating the hors d'oeuvres, which we know are dry, they would have to come and answer questions. And that's how I assessed learning. So thinking about reimagining what learning was, my students didn't do that much writing in my class. They acted out scenes. They became a part of history. And then I would always ask questions like, okay, so let's think about time and continuity. If things were to change, how would things be today? And so with asking questions like that, when it's time for those state assessments, that was their final paragraph. That's your conclusion. Time and continuity, right? Change and continuity. So that's how I taught. My students acted things out and they loved it. They're the biggest kids. The 21-year-olds, they're the big, I used to like wear these like wigs whenever I would act things out and they'd be like, Miss, let me get it. Let me put it on. And so you have like this 6'2" basketball player in the back of my class with a white wig on. And that was how we did things.
That sounds unique and exciting.
Yeah.
A little,
I have the pictures if you want
a
the
little
pictures.
crazy too, but I like it. It beats an overhead projector, that's for sure. Students, we talked about students. What about the educators and empowering them? Technology is the big thing that's just coming into the classroom left and right with AI and innovations there. You're a Microsoft and Education global training partner. What's that one advice you give to educators who want to take that jump and kind of become tech savvy in their education?
Push all the buttons. So I wasn't always tech savvy. I was creative, but I would say once we began to have more technology in the classroom, it was like no one was there to teach me how to use it. So I had to push all the buttons. And sometimes our students are the experts, right? And so I remember like getting VR glasses and saying to myself, oh, this is not going to work. Like, I don't know who they think is going to put this together. And one of the students were like, I have this at home. And he literally set everything up. And by the next week, I had students, and maybe this wasn't the way to teach the class, I had students shooting during World War II. And teachers would come in like, what are they doing? All you hear is pow, 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 duck, duck. And I'm like, well, you see it as them shooting, and I see it as they're learning about the technological advancements of World War II. They're learning about machinery, weapons, and landscape, right? All things that go into an essay. But in order for you to be tech savvy, you can't be afraid to use the technology. And I see that a lot working with educators around the world with ed tech integration. They're afraid of it. You can't be afraid. Push all the buttons. The worst that could happen is that you break something. And if you break it, hopefully the district pays for it. But if you push the buttons, you might be surprised at what happens next.
Yeah,
don't break
absolutely.
it.
And
There's
that little undo button that they always include for us, So
That's
it's just
it.
push it. I don't know what that did. Undo. Let's see what this one does.
I mean, push it. When we decided to become a global training partner for Microsoft, it was because I knew that there's a lot of school districts, especially in New York, who have Microsoft products but don't know how to use it. And so for me, if I'm already coming into your school and I'm already providing professional development on coding or artificial intelligence or even history, I can also show you how to integrate that technology that you've already paid for into what you do. You already have it.
What does that look like when you come in for that PD? How do you, in short, uplift and amplify a classroom's ability to impact their education of the students?
Oh, let me flip that around as well to parents, because we also do parent academies on coding and AI. And I always feel like parents are the group of people that people don't normally focus on. Schools and normally like, who needs PD? Let's do workshops for students. Let's do it for teachers. But we also should do it for parents because they're the ones supporting the students at home. So a couple of weeks ago, I did a parent workshop on coding and artificial intelligence. And usually when I say to people, yes, I taught parents how to code, the first thing that comes to mind is, and they listened and they sat there, yes, and yes. And yes, we had tech issues, but I understood that these are parents who are not normally on computers every single day. These are not parents who know how to really write prompts. So we thought about prompt engineering and what goes into a good prompt. How do you really speak to AI? What to expect back? How to refine your prompt, right? And even the kids who were there, we had 3rd and 8th graders there, they were showing their parents like, okay, but did you hear what she said? But you have to press. And so it's the same thing that goes with the classroom, right? If I'm coming in for a workshop, most likely I already know who the group is. I already know the teachers. I've already had a conversation, or I toured the school, or I toured your classroom. And so I know your teaching style. The next is to not only complement your teaching style into what I'm doing, but show you an easier way of doing whatever it is that you're doing. So whether that's taking time off of your mini lesson by saying, hey, instead of you lecturing for these 20 minutes, why don't you show this 3-minute clip that shows the same exact thing and give students more time to actually work independently, but also strategizing with teachers on how to meet the needs of every individual learner. So we know there are some students that are going to learn best if it's hands-on. There's other students that are going to learn best by just watching you do it. And there's others who literally just want to learn by themselves reading. And so you have to have those 3 components throughout your lesson plan. And that's normally what my workshops are. Even if it's not lesson plan writing, it's taking you through how I would teach the course.
That's interesting. With the personalized learning, we know that's key, but then the other side is collaboration. How do you ensure that things are personalized the way they need to be, but still collaborative? And then what's the coolest way you've seen students use like tech in a collaborative environment to solve problems?
So I usually have conversations with teachers. So I have a workshop coming up for a CTE program on automotives and electricity. I know nothing about cars. I know nothing about what it's like to be an electrician, but I know everything about pedagogy. And so for me, it's if I'm coming in to support you on lesson planning and unit planning and curriculum development, I need you to support me with content. And so as we sit there together, I'm asking you all the questions that I need to ask about pedagogy and your teacher style and what you hope to get out of this partnership. But you're also telling me about everything that I need to know about being in the lab space or in the classroom with you while you're doing hands-on work with students. And that's that collaborative piece. I don't ever want someone to feel like I'm coming in to do professional development because I'm an expert. I'm no expert. But we're going to collaborate together. We're going to make sure that when I'm done, you feel comfortable enough to do it on your own. And if I need to come back to support, you've already known, okay, this is the data. This is how it went. This went really well. I need help with, part 3 of this lesson plan. Can you please help me? So that usually works. So I always say collaboration is key when you're giving anyone some kind of professional development, professional learning opportunities, because then folks are more open to saying that they need help with things. If you come in and you're like, I'm lead on this and I'm the expert because they're paying me to come in to assist you, it's going to go in one ear and go out the next.
We talked about the culturally responsive education and project-based learning and how to accomplish that on a budget. But what about limited time and human resources? How does that play into it?
Oh, I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot. So what I would say is this is when backwards planning or UDL comes to mind. So always think about what you want students to be able to get out of this lesson or this unit and then work backwards, right? So if you have 3 weeks for this, how are you going to make that goal possible in 3 weeks? I know some educators that usually pick out the standards and then build a lesson plan from the standards. I'm the total opposite. I pick out the goal. And then I figure out how much time students need in order to meet that goal. And then I add on a couple of more days for students that I have to differentiate for, right? And then that allows us not only the time for differentiation, but also the time for you to have one-to-one sit-downs with students throughout the unit plan. Time is something that I believe every teacher struggles with. Even if you've been in this profession for 25 years or more, you still struggle with time management because it's constantly changing and we're always asked to do more during the class period. So what I would say is think about what's most important, skill-based, not content-based. You focus on skill, you're more likely to have students learning than with content.
How can the school leaders, the district admins, principals support teachers in embracing the culturally responsive education practices?
That's a great question. Get into the classroom, get to know your students. I remember visiting some schools and the principal knew every student by name. They knew where the student belonged. And then I remember going to another school where the principal didn't even know that they had this student. They're asking them, what class do you belong to? What's your name? And what's your last name? And so for me, it's in order for you to be culturally responsive, you have to know people. You have to know who they are when they're sad, when they're happy, what they like to do after school. Like I knew a principal who knew that students love to hang out at a deli to get sandwiches. And so what he did after school was, instead of just sitting in front of the school to make sure, everyone was leaving for dismissal, he would go to the store and he would watch students just interact with each other. And that was his way of having conversations for the next morning. Hey, how was, that turkey sandwich that you got? And so being able to sit inside the classroom or even put yourself in the communities that your students are coming from so that you can learn about them. And that also helps with tailoring your school environment to be more culturally responsive.
What role does community and family engagement play in making these methods stick and thrive in the classroom?
It's the most important role. If you do not have community or family buy-in, you don't really have anything. I remember when I was doing a PD for Singapore American School in Singapore, the first thing they had asked was, would I be willing to do a PD for parents as well, to show them the same exact thing that I was showing teachers? We have to find ways to have our communities and our parents engage and learn the same way we have our students do it, because those are your biggest supporters. They're the ones that are going to come to every bake sale. They're the ones that are going to come to every game. They're the ones that if something happens to another student in the community, they're going to make sure that they stand up and amplify that student's voice and that family's voice. And so we have to integrate our families into what we're doing, because those are the advocates for our students alongside with us.
Yeah, very much agree with that. What's up next on the plate for you and McKenzie's Adventures?
Well, we're scaling. We're scaling, and we're doing so in a phenomenal way. So what's next for us beyond the Global Hour of Code that we have coming up this August with students in Nigeria is really looking at working with P-Tech schools across New York State and really finding ways to support CTE programs. So one thing that I believe McKenzie's Adventures does best is we look beyond the curriculum. We really think about what students need, and at this time, it's college and career readiness. Most of our students that we work with are already beginning college, especially if they go to P-Tech schools. So what does that career aspect look like? And if we can really support schools, especially CTE programs that are working with our students while they're in high school, then I think that allows us to keep one foot inside of the classroom with instruction and be able to really mold the students who are going to be the future.
You said it was the Global Hour of Code?
Yes, we have a Global Hour of Code coming up in
what is that?
August. So we're teaming up with Flip Learn Kids and Coding with Culture. Flip Learn Kids is an organization in Nigeria, and we're going to do a week-long Hour of Code event where it's going to be synchronous and asynchronous. So I'll be there in person, and we're going to have 3 major locations in Nigeria of students just coding unplugged and plugged. So we're going to use code.org as well. And we have companies like Book who is going to help sponsor it. And students are going to use Book Creator to tell a story of from the first day they started activities with us to the last to document it. But we have so many political figures in Nigeria who are also supporting this cause. But the idea is that we're bringing resources to Nigeria that students need. So these future ready skills, being able to computational thinking, being able to problem solve, and understanding that there's folks that don't live in Nigeria that also want to see them win. That for me is the greatest thing. Once this company said, hey, we want to do something for students in Nigeria, I said, give me a few days. Let me think about what this looks like, and let me reach out to some folks. So we already have some educators from Nigeria, Kuwait, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Japan, Korea that have already signed up for this event.
That's awesome. International landscape is very intriguing as far as education just globally. If you could wave your wand and change one thing about the global education landscape, what would that be?
So I know that there's some schools that I work with, international schools that I work with, that literally use the curriculum from New York for most of their teaching and learning programs. And I wish it was the opposite. And the reason for it is because when I walk into those classrooms in different countries, they're more open to having students innovate and create and ask questions. In America, I don't really see teachers pushing students to think beyond what's in the curriculum. And so I would change. I would actually have us use what they create, because I feel like with some of these countries, they're centuries, like they're learning this centuries away from what we're doing. Although we are kind of like the catalyst for some new ideas, I believe that in foreign countries, they're not afraid to have students ask questions and experiment. Like they're okay with students getting things wrong. And I feel like as a society, we haven't been okay with that for so many years. And I think state assessments is the reason why, because we have to have students pass these mandated assessments, where in other countries, yes, they take state assessments, but students are experimenting, y'all. Like I went to Singapore and students were building robots. Like, yeah, it was a robotics course, but they were actually building robots and programming it themselves.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I did not get that in my education.
Neither did I. Neither did I. And even when I was teaching, I got Legos.
If you had unlimited funding, what would that dream program you would launch? What would that be?
I would create an international school. I would create an international school that prides itself on blended learning, because I would want it to be open to students from around the world who can still learn from their specific country. But I would also have it where students can live in a school. So I've always had this dream of having a school with like a dorm, but every room be set up like a different country and a different learning experience. I don't know, like when I was a teacher, being able to, so we had the history rooms were set up like as if you were walking into a museum. Our global history room was set up as Africa apartheid, right? So you had the jail cell of Nelson Mandela, you had some books, you had some quotes. Our mathematics room was set up like ancient Egypt. So you had the pyramids and students had to think about the calculations and measurements. So when you walked into a classroom, you were more in awe of everything else that was in there, because you knew you were about to explore and learn something new. With this school, that's how I would have it. I would have it as different countries, so that when students walk in, they're also learning about what that country is known for academically. I don't know. I think it would be awesome. I would definitely have a scholarship program for students who can't afford it. I would definitely have parents learn in. So it would definitely have to be an adult education piece to it, because, there's no learning without parents learning. But definitely an international school would be my dream. Are you saying that you're giving me some money for an international school?
We'll see. Funders out there, take note. We've got big dreams over here.
Big dreams.
All right, we're going to do a quick one here. First thing that pops into your head, the book you'd recommend to every educator.
Why did you do that to me?
It's McKenzie's Adventures.
I mean, yeah, but this, oh my God. These two.
You get one.
Punished for Dreaming, Bettina Love. Yeah.
There we go. Your go-to classroom playlist song.
I'm from Brooklyn. I love hip hop. So anything Biggie Smalls is me. Just not the explicit version.
Okay. All right. A Big Papa. Got it.
Yeah. Come on.
A tech tool you can't live without.
Are you really doing this to me today? I would say Peer Deck. I'm a sucker for interactive slide decks.
I like it. Best advice you've ever received as an educator.
Keep going. I had one of my best friends he was my mentor in high school. And so he's been there from the time that I was 14 to now. And he's now a principal of a school in Queens, New York. But he's always like, keep going, because you're inspiring us all, even those of us who wish that we had the energy to do all the things that you're doing.
So you dropped so much wisdom today.
Thank you so much. I feel like I was like, I speak so fast.
Absolutely not. For our audience out there, the educators, administrators, anyone in the education space, what's the one takeaway that you hope they carry with them after listening?
There's no endpoint to learning. I feel like every day should be a new opportunity to learn something from someone that you probably didn't even know knew the answers to the topic that you were pondering about. And so give yourself the opportunity to be open-minded when learning something new and take it all in.
Where can our listeners connect and dive deeper on the amazing work you're doing with McKenzie's Adventures?
Well, you can find me at McKenzie'sadventures.com, but also I am on LinkedIn under Yaritza Villalba. I am also on Instagram at yaritza.v__. And I'm across socials, y'all. Let's connect.
You heard her. Reach out and connect. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember to keep thinkering, keep inspiring the next generation. Until next time, we're out. Thanks, Yaritza.
Thank you.
Love the term thinkering, and we'll definitely use it in my classroom. The kids will love it.
This is where we can be that peer support network with each other. When the big picture clicks, it's beautiful when you get administrators and teachers together.
You can't be a leader of other people if you can't first lead yourself, right?
Helps the educator have a very clear and structured framework.
Becomes this real community hub. If you're a great educator, you're looking for the most powerful moment. Can we inspire kids to believe that the world needs who they were made to be?
I hope you guys continue to uphold that legacy and continue, finding kids like you.